Tory speaking live.
Allow the traffic laws to still be enforced, and this time with the help of technology.
John, by various accounts, you've got at least one budget gap, perhaps two if you count some of the unfunded projects on that list. You've got the KPMG report, which is pointing out savings you could implement here, but this kicks it down the road with the creation of this task force. Couldn't you use the KPMG report as a basis to make some cuts at the police service level?
Well, you see, this is the thing. Even in a company, I can tell you, I mean, I've had the experience leading a big organization. And this notion that you can just come in and say, well, effective tomorrow morning, we're going to replace police officers with technology. Well, how long is it going to take to buy the technology? Are we going to have something you would all insist, I think quite rightly on, which is a proper competition to select the right technology and the best bidder? How are we going to make the adjustments to then redeploy the police? These things take time. Has this taken longer because this has been understudy for 2 or 3 years now than it should? Yes, it has. But are we now going to get on with it to the point where you heard me specifically insist as a board member that I wanted to see specific recommendations for inclusion in next year's budget brought to the Police Services Board in June? And the answer was yes, those things will be brought to the board. I understand the need to get on with these things, but I don't think you could name me too much out of that report that could be implemented tomorrow morning and allow us to reduce the 2016 budget. It just doesn't work that way in terms of buying equipment or redeploying people or retraining people or hiring new people to do things that aren't police officers. We are committed to making the changes that are necessary to stop the growth in police budgets and to more effectively and efficiently deploy highly trained police officers to fight crime and to work with the community as opposed to doing things like sitting in a car watching people turn left or not.
A couple more questions.
Yeah.
The last budget was approved at more than $1 billion. It was the highest yet. You yourself, after that meeting, after approving it, say, you know, we as the city can't maintain this or keep this pattern going. So what is the target? How much do you think can be cut? What would be a reasonable police budget going forward?
I'm not going to name a number because I think at the beginning of this exercise of actually making the recommendations and implementing them to more effectively deploy police officers and use technology and bring about efficiencies, I think it would be folly for me to name a number. But I can only tell you one of the main purposes of doing this entire exercise is to allow us this year, starting in June with specific recommendations to be forthcoming at that time, to identify more efficient ways to police and more effective ways to police so that we can, to repeat myself, we can deploy officers better than sitting in a car watching for left turns or even sitting in a car watching for people to go through school zones going too fast. These are things we have to face up to and we have to deal with, and I'm determined to lead in that process, and it's going to get done.
Mayor, can you shed any light on any conversations you may have had with the chief or anyone in the policing services over the last few days, considering the amount of violence we've seen from Friday until today?
I've talked to the police. I talk to them frequently, and I've talked to him today. I talked to him yesterday, and all I can say is that I have indicated to him that anything that he needs by way of assistance to ensure that he can more effectively deal, in particular, with these thugs that are involved in what I call targeted executions, he will have that help, and he also will have help, although it's much harder to figure out how to deal with the more random acts that we've seen a couple of in the last couple of days. But he knows he has my full support in that, and I reiterate something that I've said before. These acts are tragic, they're unacceptable, they have been at an unacceptable rate in the last few days, though you could identify other times in the year when there haven't been very many or any. But having said all that, the city is still safe. We went through a whole bunch of numbers today that are generally publicly available about incidents involving firearms and so on, and while some of the numbers are up, there's no question about that, the city overall is safe, and we have to remember that these are by and large incidents that are happening in isolated parts of the city and on a somewhat isolated basis, although there has been obviously a concentration of these events that is unacceptable in the last number of days.
John, will you open the competition of paid duty to the public? So
Miguel,
we can break up the monopoly and create like Uber Cup, maybe an Uber Cup application, so we can make it most efficient and financial feasible for the city of Toronto.
May I just say that since Miguel, I'm not sure you're a member of the media, but I'm happy to answer your question. It is a misnomer, a misunderstanding on the part of the public that paid duty is largely borne by the taxpayers. Most of it, in fact, is borne by private companies or other people. Some of it, a minority, is borne by the taxpayers. And the rate was reset again today at the same rate as last year. And as you know, there's a continuous review going on of the paid duty guidelines with a view to seeing if there are other people, other ways in which we could make use of our police officers again and not have them doing the paid duty to the extent they are right now.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. One more question, if there are any.
Just now that we are live on TV 24, we didn't get this live earlier,
Yeah.
but these talks about cutting costs for Toronto Police Services come at a time when there is a rash of violence in the city. So how is that balance met for those who I guess would be afraid that a sense of safety or security may be at
The entire purpose of this exercise is to see how we can more effectively use highly trained, expensive police officers to be in the community dealing with important criminal matters and things like that, and having a proper liaison with the community, as opposed to doing things like sitting two in a car watching people to turn left or not and break the traffic laws. There are other ways we can do that, and we're going to look at all of those kinds of things, and we're going to have some very important discussions with the Police Association, and I trust they will come in good faith to the table to honestly discuss things that could make a big difference in policing costs, like the way the shifts are set up and the requirement to have two people in a car. And those are things they agreed to in the collective agreement, and I'm looking forward to those discussions happening, because they represent an opportunity for us to better spend the public's money and make sure we can better police the city.
You seem very keen on ending the watch for left turn violators, and I hate left turn violators, so anything we do to improve that, great. What else in the KPMG stands out as just an exceptional way to reduce the budget in your mind?
The other ones are more complex, to be honest. I mean, you know, you can say, well, reducing the number of divisions seems like a sort of no-brainer. Well, ask the local councillors how they would feel, or even some local residents. So I think that's why we have to have the discussion now, the entire task force, and that includes people from the community, to talk about whether a structure that has many positive aspects to it, which would have more grassroots police stations and so on,